Welcome to the Ecom Breakthrough Podcast. Are you ready to unlock the full potential and growth in your business? You've already crossed 7 figures in sales, but the challenge is knowing how to take your business to the next level. Join Josh Hadley, an 8-figure ecom business owner and investor, as he interviews highly successful business owners. Get ready, because you're going to learn specific actions you can take today to help your business reach its full potential and leave a lasting impact on the world.
Welcome to the Ecom Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hadley, where I interview the top business leaders in e-commerce. Previous guests include Kevin King, Stephen Pope, and Roland Frazier. Today, I'm speaking with Adam Runquist, aka Adam Heist, and we will be talking a lot about lessons learned from exiting multiple brands and the new strategies he's implementing with his new brands he's working on. This episode is brought to you by Ecom Breakthrough Consulting, where I help 7-figure companies grow to 8 figures and beyond. Listen, Adam, I started my business back in 2015 and grew it to an 8-figure brand in 7 years. But I made a lot of mistakes along the way that made the path of getting to 8 figures really take a lot longer than it needed to. There were times where I really had a lot of self-doubt, or whether my brand could actually become a household brand name and actually survive. And also dealing with cash flow issues and trying to make sure that I had the financial acumen to manage the books and to grow the business. So to our listeners, those of you who have hit similar plateaus and want to know the next steps to take your brand to the next level, then go to ecombreakthrough.com to learn more. That's ecom with 2 M's. And as a special bonus to my podcast listeners, this month I'm giving away one $10,000 comprehensive business strategy audit session at no cost. All you need to do is email me at josh@ecombreakthrough.com and plead your case as to why I should choose you and your brand to work with for this month's strategy session. And if you don't win this month, don't worry, you'll be entered to win for future months to come. Today, I am super excited to introduce y'all to Adam Runquist. Adam has spent nearly a decade in corporate life as a director for a Fortune 300 energy company. This eventually led to the acquisition of a physical products brand, Goal Zero, a journey that inspired him to build and sell a number of his own Amazon-centric ecom brands. Adam now runs the YouTube channel Adam Heist, FBA Masterclass, and numerous brands in the cycling niche. So with that introduction, welcome to the show, Adam.
Josh, man, it's good to be on here. Thanks for chasing me down and making this happen. Excited to chat with you, man.
Hey, well, I'm appreciative of you joining the podcast here. I know we initially met at Kevin King's $1 Billion Seller Summit. You were speaking there. And as soon as I saw you talk, obviously I've been following your YouTube channel for a while. And once I heard you talk, I was like, I got to get this guy's info, see if we can twist his arm enough to get him onto the podcast. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, man. Super grateful we got to connect there too. And glad we got to parlay that into the chat today.
And you were, I guess you kind of just did a world tour over a 5-week period, right? You went to Seller Sessions in London, $1 Billion Seller Summit. Where all did you go?
Yeah, it was interesting, man. So I did a ton of traveling kind of in my college era, the typical kind of poor backpacker staying in hostels thing. So I did that for, I think, a couple months in my junior year of college. And I've traveled, here and there since then, primarily for business, within the US and Canada for personal reasons. But, I think a lot of why we do this is that we aren't encumbered by the typical schedule and asking your boss for PTO. And hey, I can only take 1 week because my, employees are going to, or people at my corporate job are going to get kind of, where's Adam for a week plus. So I took a step back. I'm like, it's been a minute since I've done that. And it kind of happened to align with the spring schedule. There was a ton of events in the Amazon space in the spring. So I started off in the UK at Seller Sessions Live. And then I had in May, and then I had another speaking engagement in Estonia early June, which is kind of the other side of Europe. And then I had the Capstone $1 Billion Seller Summit where we met in Puerto Rico. And it really didn't make sense to fly. I'm in Utah, so it's quite a jaunt to get to Europe from that side of the US. So I'm like, why don't I just hunker down in Europe? And aside from those 3 venues, I kind of just let my inspiration take me where I wanted. So I ended up going to about 12 or 13 countries, 4 continents over 5 weeks. So it was a gauntlet, but it was a super fun way to travel, and it kind of reinvigorated that travel bug in me. So it was super sweet. So yeah, I spent a ton of time in the UK, did a 5-day hike in Portugal. My origins are Swedish from my background. So I got to go to the motherland for the first time, which was cool. And then went to Morocco, so hit Africa up briefly, and then went to the Middle East to check out Tel Aviv. There's a ton of people in the Amazon space in Israel, so got to kind of reconnect there, go to a buddy's wedding. Went to Dubai and then wrapped it up in Puerto Rico. So yeah, it was a whirlwind tour, super fun and interesting experience.
That's amazing. Sounds absolutely incredible. And I think, like you said, I think it's like an opportunity to kind of like recharge, right? I feel like when you do take those breaks, you kind of like see life in a whole new perspective, especially when you're traveling and seeing new things. It's experiencing new things as well. And you come back with a new perspective, I think, to business, which is really what I want to kind of center our conversation around. You've got so much experience. You lived the corporate life, right? You helped acquire a business in your corporate career. And then on top of that, you then helped exit your own brands, or you exited your Amazon brands. You're building new brands as well. And so I think you're able to kind of look back from a mountaintop or peak, so to speak, and look back on the journey with a new frame of reference. And so to our listeners that are all, primarily 7-figure sellers that are looking to kind of scale their business, they want to go to 8 figures and beyond. I want our conversation to really focus on like all of those strategies, things that you've learned along the way of, hey, I remember I did this, I'd probably do this differently in the future. So with that being said, Adam, maybe we'll kick it off with, as you exited some of your Amazon brands in the past, what are some of the things that the biggest lessons that you learned from that you would maybe advise other people that are either getting ready to exit or trying to scale their business, that you would, provide them with insight to say, hey, maybe steer clear of this, or maybe go in this direction?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can kind of answer that, I guess, strategically, tactically, which is probably what the root of the question is. But the interesting thing for me has been the more philosophical question, which I'll kind of get to. I think on the strategic, tactical side, I think, especially now in kind of modern Amazon, it used to be you could be an everything store and sell stuff across different niches to different customers, and you can still do that, I guess, to a certain degree. But that kind of brand building on Amazon is harder to exit now, just as things have gotten a little bit more sophisticated, as the belts have tightened up a little bit in the acquisition space. So I think for me, starting with the end in mind, if that is your goal to exit, you've got to kind of think about, well, who would want to buy my business and why would they want to buy it? So currently, I would say that folks are looking for more cohesive brands. That doesn't need to be a Nike, and you don't need to have 30,000 followers on Instagram, all that stuff, but you've got to have a specific emotional feeling and a specific customer that you're developing your products for and that you're speaking to. And that helps solidify your position on Amazon and makes it a more tangible asset that isn't just about price, which is important to people buying. I think the other thing that has definitely changed, when I exited, you could get away on the low end with about a $300,000 earnings, to 500. That was kind of a pretty common sweet spot for a lot of folks that were exiting. I think now the aggregators and private equity sellers and other folks, they want it to be, it's the same amount of work to acquire a company that's doing $1 million a year as it is 10 for the most part. Obviously the risk dynamics change a little bit. So they're looking for minimum 500,000 EBITDA, but really it's that $1 million plus EBITDA. So you're kind of having to build a business that's in the $3+ million range. So I think, to start out, if you're looking to exit, you're going to want to have a business that's cohesive, where you've got thoughtful differentiation around both the brand and the products you're developing. So yeah, and then the second thing is you really need to right size your business to get as many qualified buyers to the table, right? So that's a $3 million plus business. So I think those are some of the cornerstones that folks should be building today. I think the other thing that gets lost on people is, you see, especially in the space, a lot of vanity metrics, screenshots of revenue, and, I did this on Prime Day and all that stuff. My ACoS is this. What ultimately matters is how much money your business earns. And so you've got to have a fairly curated, unemotional perspective when you're looking at your catalog and your business. And there's undoubtedly going to be SKUs that are more of a drag on your cash and your business. They just don't generate enough profit. And the multiples are based on profit for most brands. And so I think that lends towards profitability, being pragmatic and unemotional about, how you want to pull the levers in your business, which products you focus on, what's actually driving profitability in your business. And then you've got to have a 12-month lens, right? Typically, unless you're a hyper growth brand where you're kind of factoring in, additional growth rates, sometimes you can get that as part of the exit experience. But most brands are going to be valued based on their history, specifically the last 12 months. And so, if you don't want to think, hey, I'm going to sell my business now in 2 months, and then you really haven't curated the business to optimize profits over a 12-month period. So having that timeline view. So that's to answer your pragmatic question. I think the other thing I would say is and this was lost on me a little bit, which is, why do you want to sell and build a business in the first place?
Yeah.
Intrinsically, it's been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. I kind of had that soul calling. I spent longer than I wanted to, I think, in corporate, but I always had that gut feeling like there was a different kind of life made for me. And it happened to be the stars aligned with points in my career and experience where everything kind of aligned. I'm like, you know what, I just got to go after this thing. And the pursuit of that kind of soul calling was incredibly rewarding, but I always had numbers and outcomes as I started to kind of see things realize themselves. And I'll tell you, I thought that the exit experience and that kind of, reaching the top of the hike was going to be, have a pretty big burn after the fact and kind of change my life after. And it certainly has, but I'll tell you, it lasted about a couple days, and then it's,
Really?
you kind of get the so what. And I've come to realize that you've got to get your core needs met. Like, it's nice to not have to worry about money to be able to pay your mortgage. If you've got a family, take care of your kids, all those things that you kind of need to have so that money isn't a stressor in your life. But once you have those things met, then you got to realize who you are as a human being and what you care about. And typically business isn't going to be that. Certainly if you've got very outcome specific external drivers that are what kind of makes you happy. And I think if you don't have that lens, that's not going to solve it for you. You're still going to have to look at the mirror and figure out who you are as a human being. So I think the philosophical questions are equally important as the strategic ones when you're looking to build and scale and exit a business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. And I know I've heard that numerous times, right? So many people think that, my life's just going to be completely changed when I exit my business. And yeah, you ride that high for a couple of days and you're like, okay, now what? Right? I'm still the same person. Like, nothing's really materially changed other than what's sitting in my bank account, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of introspection. So I think you hit the nail right on the head there. So I'm interested, Adam. You've launched a new brand, Rightio, that you're public about. I think you've also got a couple other brands that you're working on as well. Is that true?
Yeah, so the business I sold was in the home goods space. So it was roughly about 2 years from actually launching the first product that I exited that. So it was a fairly quick turnaround. Around the middle point to building that business, about a year into that one, I realized, hey, I'm freaking obsessed with the business model, and I had a ton of fun building that business, but I didn't really care so much about the products or the customer. I'm a pretty avid cyclist and mountain biker. That's kind of my world. I'm the customer. I understood it. So I'm like, this next one I want to do, which I kind of did at the same time I was growing that other business. I'm like, I want to go after somebody that's me. And so I built out primarily a cycling accessories business. So that's been about 3 years old. So one component of my time is kind of seeing that one through. It's about 3 years old, and it's been a fun journey building that in a different way than I built my home goods business. And then I've had kind of a similar introspective view on, okay, hey, what's next for me in terms of what do I want to build next? And I've really tried to tap in, especially having the exit experience, going through some things that were achievements, like that what next question, who am I, et cetera. And, I was drawn back to my experience as a kid, that first time riding a bike and the freedom that came with it, discovering who I was as a kid and kicking out with my friends, going out for 6 hours. I was in the 80s where, we didn't wear helmets and our parents said, come home when the streetlights are on. But that emotional experience, looking back, was a pretty profound thread in my life. And it certainly carried me into adulthood in terms of riding bikes now. So I wanted to try to innovate around that first bike for kids and really, galvanize that experience for other people and give them a unique brand and product to be able to do that. And so, we're starting out with a kids balance bike, which is, how kids typically learn bikes now without training wheels. And there's a whole fleet of other stuff down the line with helmets and other accessories. So it's a bit more of a soul project, but also leaning into the experience that I've had with physical products brand on the retail side, as well as on the eComm and Amazon side.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've been able to kind of merge your passions, right, into your businesses as well. And that's, why you exited, in the home goods space. And now, kind of playing in a space that you're super passionate about. I think that's what every entrepreneur really aspires to do, is try to create something around something that they truly enjoy. But I'm interested to hear your perspective, Adam, after the exits that you've had. What are the strategies that you're implementing in your brands right now? I know with Rideo, the balance bike, you're just about to launch onto Amazon, right? You've already been selling the cycling accessories brand on Amazon for a while. So tell me about what are some of the strategies that you're implementing now? You've seen the Amazon game change and it will continue to change over time. So what is it that you're actively working on? What do you see as the biggest levers that can make the biggest impact in those brands?
Yeah, and I think it's a good question. And it's really important to be cognizant of the channel with which you're deploying your products and understanding the dynamics that are shifting. I got into the game around 2019 with my own brand, so a little bit before you. You certainly saw the early day Wild West of Amazon, but there was still a decent amount of that going on in 2019. It was, the rebates, giveaways, those kind of funnels. You could kind of get away, frankly, with somewhat mediocre products, somewhat mediocre imagery. If you understood how to rank and those tactics and keyword stuff, that could get you organic ranking. You could build up reviews. You've got your moat, and you could kind of carry on about your business. I think the business is much less about those alley-oops now, which is like, hey, what's the latest thing that might last 3-4 months, and kind of hacking your way to organic ranking. What's ultimately changed is I think the drive of COVID demand and the spike in e-commerce, as well as physical retail getting retracted during COVID. It's forced a lot of larger players to get into the Amazon channel. They can't ignore it anymore. And I think also that professionalization of the space has brought in more sophistication. And when I say sophistication, it's not rocket science, but I would just say it's a more professional approach to selling products, developing products, etc. I think the other dynamic at play here is that, there was, in terms of, the organic first page of Amazon, there was, maybe 4 sponsored ads, maybe a masthead ads, and then the rest was organic. Now it's significantly more taken up by ads. You've got editorial recommendations and other things that basically really, unless you're the top 3 or 4 spots on organic, you're probably somewhere around the middle of the page. And so I think that's forced a knowledge of pay-per-click, how to understand the organic versus paid, what's driving rank, what's profitable, what's not, and being thoughtful about that. And then I think the final kind of leg that I think has changed, and not a lot of people like to talk about this, but it's certainly a big part of the business, which is the operational supply chain side of things. How do you do your demand planning? How are you shipping your products? What's your warehousing strategy? You've now got to go to 3 Amazon DCs. How do you make that cost effective on trucks? And so for me, the main shift has been from these alley-oops, 3-4 month hacks where operations were fairly simple. You could kind of get away with being 70% solid, to you got to get back to foul shots. It's not rocket science, but you've got to have thoughtfully developed products that are really differentiated, that have longevity. You've got to understand your customer. You've got to speak to your customer with world-class imagery. You've got to speak to your customer in your bullets. You've got to understand very pragmatically what keywords are driving rank and what are converting. You've got to really understand and dial in your pay-per-click strategy. So it's much more back to basics, but the basics matter a lot more than they used to. Yeah. So with that, I would say a lot of my focus now, and Rideo is a good example, which is how do I develop a bike that's different, that is hard to replicate, that takes a significant amount of technical skill to develop. We've got utility patents and stuff in the line there for additional kind of a moat. But more than that, it's understanding the customer, right? Who's buying it? How do I develop my product with that in mind? What are the images that I use to help them click on the listing and ultimately convert on it? What are the keywords that really matter? And frankly, getting out of the price game, I still think, Amazon's probably always going to be a pretty price-centric game. I mean, you see the top 3 to 4 products on organic search. They're probably not the best products, but they've probably been around for quite a while, have reviews, and they're frankly just really thin margin, low price products. If you don't want to play that game, and most can't, and most frankly, it's just an uninteresting game to play, you then got to understand, well, why would somebody buy my product? And that's where I think that emotional experience, that brand building, finding out ways to convert with a higher priced product, maybe around the middle of search, and how do you make the economics of that work, and kind of having that in mind. So that's been a shift. And then I certainly think, given the pay-per-click complexities and how significant that is as a cost to the overall business, I think most people's product cost is probably the biggest one, 25-30% of their cost, but right behind that is going to be 15-ish% on Amazon spend. So how do you do that efficiently? How do you do that effectively? And what are some cost arbitrage ways to get the clicks, views, and conversions that don't rely on Amazon. And that's really where the external traffic strategies and some influencer stuff comes in. So really putting my back into that a lot more, in addition to companioning that with kind of efficient, thoughtful pay-per-click.
Yeah, I think you eloquently laid out everything well in terms of like everything that an Amazon seller needs to be thinking about. And I think that long gone are the days of the quick win hacks that you can just ride the, wave for the next couple months and then be having to look for something else in the meantime. What you talked about, though, is kind of that professionalization that has happened in the Amazon space. And I think that is the biggest like mindset shift that a lot of the Amazon sellers that are currently just like solo entrepreneurs right now kind of need to have, is they're going to be fighting up against teams and large corporations that have dedicated, marketing agencies and PPC, specialists that are laser focusing in on their PPC strategies. They've got creative teams, right? They have like entire creative directors that are responsible for the way all of the images look on Amazon, developing the A+ content in addition to the storefront. So there is so much to really like focus on Amazon. So my question to you, Adam, would be like, if you have a solo entrepreneur, right, and maybe a couple virtual assistants that are helping them, where would you recommend that they start in terms of like trying to professionalize their own brand?
Yeah, I think there's probably three different areas. I think the first is product development, and I think this is probably the one that's least talked about, but going to become much more critical. Again, if you kind of rewind 2, 3, 5 years, whatever your number is, you could basically white label a product for the most part. Now, you might find a unique manufacturer, a product that's not out there, but with very little tweaks, you could kind of take your brand that aligns with that product, do the box, do the insert card, do the label on it, make it yours, and launch it on Amazon. I think that strategy still works, certainly in products that do less in revenue because they're a little bit less competitive. But I think if you want to have longevity, and when I say longevity, if you want that product to be fairly defendable for 2 to 5 years, which is really where you're going to need to be from a cash flow kind of net contribution margin standpoint, you've got to be thoughtful about what's actually different. And it doesn't need to be, again, rocket science. It could be subtle tweaks, but I think that you've got to make different enough products that align with who you're trying to sell for, and really understanding when somebody types in those keywords that matter for that product category and you look at what else is on there, how is the product that I'm developing going to stand out? Why is somebody going to click on it? Why is somebody ultimately going to buy it, especially if it's a slightly more higher price than what's else out there? And you've got to be more thoughtful in product development. So for me, what maybe used to take a couple months of, hey, I'm going to find 15 different suppliers for this thing, I'm going to order 15 samples. Within a month, I've got all those. I'll maybe tweak a couple things, get the box design, and then 2 months, you're ready to go to production. I think the product life cycle in terms of development is now probably more in that 5 to 7 month range, where you've got to be a little bit more distinct about it. You might need to get some molds made. You might have 3, 4 iterations of the product to get it right. You might have different material choices. You might layer in patent strategy to that. So I think pillar number 1 is focusing more of your thoughtful energy on product development. Because if you get that right, honestly, everything else is easier. Ranking's easier, pay-per-click's easier, conversion rates are easier. Like if you get that right, it makes things substantially easier. So I think that should be the fundamental focus, again, with a very customer-centric lens when you're developing that. I think the second thing is really listing optimization, and it's a dynamic effort that occurs over time. Historically, I think it's been an effective strategy to look at 50, 100, 200 keywords and really, run really wide. I think the game for me has changed a lot more, where there's probably going to be 5 to 15 keywords that really matter for most products, that are really relevant, that are really going to convert, that you're really going to actually spend money on pay-per-click, and that you're really going to rank on. And so being thoughtful about understanding which ones to include, which ones not to include, how that changes over time, how you're monitoring those keywords, what you're doing to drive incremental benefit to them, how you're backing in or backing off of pay-per-click spend on those. So I think like a very concentrated keyword strategy is important on the listing. Obviously, imagery is a big thing too, making sure A/B testing stuff. So I think pillar number 2 is just that listing optimization activity. And then I think the third is around traffic, right? Which is understanding what proportion of your sales are driven by organic, and how can you get more of those? How much are you spending on pay-per-click, and where? What's the best way to put your back into pay-per-click when you need to take a step back? And then are there those arbitrage opportunities where, and this is where I think a lot of sellers can make a lot of benefit for their businesses, which is, how do I not rely on organic? How do I not rely on pay-per-click distinctly? And what can I do to drive my own traffic that's much more cost effective than what's available on the Amazon platform? And that comes in the form of primarily, I would say Google ads is the biggest one, but you've got YouTube ads in the mix now, some other paid spend, and then leveraging influencers and other strategies to kind of drive both the algorithm, sales, and organic rank using non-traditional Amazon strategies.
Yeah, I love that. I love those kind of like 3 actionable takeaways you already laid out for people, right? You've got first, that product research and development, I think is so crucial. And I love what you talked about. If you can crush it in your product R&D, right, it makes launching the product, ranking the product, everything else so much easier because you've got a unique and differentiated product. I think all too often, way too many sellers are still going back to the courses that were pitched back in 2020 or 2015, early 2010, right? And it was all about like just kind of creating a Me Too product, right? Just find something that's selling well and put your own brand name on it, right? And so I think like long gone are those days, and you're really fighting an uphill battle if that's kind of like the way you're approaching your new product development right now. I want to dive into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of these 3 strategies that you laid out for us, Adam. When it comes to product research and development, knowing that it is so important, are there any like software tools or like strategies that you've seen that you and your team have been able to implement to, you know, come out with something that's genuinely unique? It allows you to file a utility patent or even a design patent and kind of make those moats bigger around your brand.
Yeah, I think probably one of the more interesting ones, and this is again why when you focus on the customer, and if you are the customer and you understand that niche pretty distinctively as a user of those products, I actually don't start most of my product research on Amazon. You know, I'm not typically using software. I'm not on there looking at, hey, what's frequently bought together, a lot of those other strategies that other folks use. And those certainly work. There's a lot of ways to splice this, but the strategy I like better is to basically think about, okay, I wanted to build a business around kids' bikes. Okay. Well, what are all the things that kids are going to need when they get into biking? Okay. Well, they're going to start out on a balance bike. That's what they're going to start out on.
Yeah.
You know, about 4 years old, or they might even start on if they're 1 year old, they might start out on one of those 4-wheeler trikes. So that's really the starting point. Then they get into a balance bike. Then they're going to get into a small pedal bike. And then they're going to graduate to another one in 3-4 years. They're going to need helmets. They might need lights. They might need tassels. Like for me, it just starts out with really reverse engineering the customer experience on what products they need when they're on their journey. And I did the same thing with my cycling brand. Then I start to think, okay, let's use balance bikes as an example. Is there anything I could do interesting that could make it different? So I haven't even looked at Amazon at this point. Once I feel like I've got something, and a lot of this is pulling on threads, and some of them lead to nowhere, some of them lead to something interesting, and then they lead to nowhere. Some of them you keep on pulling the thread and you're like, okay, I think I've got something here. Then I'll go on Amazon and I'll think about, hey, what's the keyword that someone's going to type in? Again, it's not super brand centric in terms of keywords unless you've got an omnichannel brand, but what are the generic keywords that people are going to type in, and then what's showing up on that page? And what you're typically going to see is some form of, I would say, Far East sellers typically that are the lowest price products that are going to be cascaded across that organic search. Okay, well, how am I going to make mine interesting at 20, 30, 40, 50% the cost of that? And would somebody actually be compelled to buy? And then you're going to run into another layer of products that is branded players that, again, sell in REI, that sell in all these other places. And Amazon is one of their channels, but they do pretty well because people trust the business and they're willing to pay up for that. So I like that sweet spot in between those two, which is I feel like I'm within range of those ones that are the low cost providers, but I can use my brand, use my imagery, use those other things that matter from an emotional experience and a customer lens that can make them pay up. And that also has a feel and a vibe, even if they haven't heard of my brand, which they likely haven't if they're searching on Amazon, that engenders trust that a bigger brand would, but you're 20, 30% less the cost of those bigger brands. So I love that sweet spot in between those two things. And then it's just about running the math, right? Like, hey, can I actually make this thing work? Getting some rough sample costs from suppliers, running the math on, hey, do I have enough margin here given all the dynamics of Amazon to make this thing work? if it checks those boxes, then it's about, okay, well, how can I actually conceptualize this potential differentiation idea that I've got and bring that to life? So in the case of the balance bikes, most of them are rigid bikes. They're typically going to be kind of cheap aluminum. I don't know about you. I don't have kids, but I wouldn't want to put my kid on a, $50 bike from a brand I don't know of that's called Jinghua or whatever the name of it is. Like I'm willing to pay up. Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard of Strider bikes, which is, one of the big players, and that's what most people buy, but that's also a fairly boring design, even though I trust the brand, and it's $120. So for us, it was like, okay, we can do a design differentiation. We can use new material choices. We can make the colors unique. We can make the thing look damn good and engender trust from a brand that visually represents who I am as a consumer. So that's kind of the thought process. So for me, I like to start off of Amazon, just kind of reverse engineering the customer purchase patterns, what they buy, seeing if I can differentiate. Then I'll go to Amazon, see if I can make the math work. And sometimes you get shut down at that point just because there's too many reviews or there's just too much going on that it's hard to justify or you don't have the budget to justify going after that. And then really finding unique factories, I think, is the other one. We spend quite a bit of time now and again kind of focusing on a niche that you understand. You build up a Rolodex and a playbook over time of finding those suppliers that are maybe off the beaten path a little bit, that you can truly build a unique relationship with, that you can get unique terms and build unique products.
Yeah, I think those are all really great insights. And I think just one thing to add on to that is, you talked about having a Rolodex of manufacturers that you could reach out to, right? That's something that's built over time, right? And so it may be a product that you're initially looking at, right? And maybe it leads to nowhere first off, right? And maybe you run up to a dead end, but you've reached out to a few factories, right? And you now have some contacts, right? You never know if those contacts or those experiences will actually come to play out in your benefit down the road. And so it all goes back to that. We talk about like seeing failures, so to speak, as stepping stones to success. And I feel like for product research and development, I think that statement is even more true because you should be experimenting with a lot. You should be trying out a lot. You should be surveying, talking to customers, and trying to get to the heart of really what you talked about, Adam, is like, how can you serve the customer better? Right? Like at the end of the day, business is very simple. If you just approach it from the frame or from the mindset of, look, I'm trying to serve somebody, right? And have that somebody in mind. And then maybe you go interview those type of people. And so I love everything that you talked about. Did you ever survey, parents with young kids?
Yeah, 100%. So, obviously a 1 to 3 year old kid's not buying the bike unless they're sophisticated and somehow know how to use a credit card at that age, which is highly unlikely. So it's going to be the parents, right? It's going to be the mom or the dad or the grandparents kind of gifting it to them. So, and then we kind of started to understand who purchases this. And obviously all 3 of those different segments buy bikes for kids, but it tends to actually be the mom, surprisingly enough, that purchases the product. And, most of the time, that doesn't mean that a dad's not or a grandparent's not. So you got to have, a wide enough net that captures their attention. But our focus in terms of understanding the pain points was moms. And so we had kind of what we called a Lululemon mom avatar, which is somebody that's, in that 30 to 38-year-old range that, has a busy life, still likes to be cool themselves, probably takes their kids to the park, follows a bunch of other moms on Instagram. There's a bit of narcissism mixed in there, which is like, their friends are looking and judging them. They're looking and judging their friends. I mean, just getting into the psychology, it's real. But so we reached out and had a number of conversations with folks to say, hey, here's the name of the brand. Here's some logo options. We started there with brand identity. But then as we started to hone in on the product concept, I wanted to understand what are the psychological hot buttons to press to make them convert? And I think that comes from either pain or pleasure, right? They either want an ego stroked, which again gets into some human psychology that's not necessarily talked about, but it's true. And or there's pain points and fears, right? And so obviously kind of starting out with the fears, people, that have a 2-year-old kid want the bike to be safe. So you've got to engender trust with the quality of the product that you're making. But then there got to be like, one of the things that, and again, these are words that are coming from our customer avatar in those conversations where it's like, I take, my 3 kids to the park and my youngest, I'm carrying their bike and they'll ride it for 5 minutes, but then inevitably they're going to get bored. They're not going to ride the thing for all 2 hours. So they end up taking it. And when you got a stroller and you've got 2 other kids and knapsacks and whatever else, So we were like, okay, that's a hot button, right? Like carrying a bike, how do you make that more seamless? So we have the shoulder strap, we had it more compact that you can actually tuck it underneath the stroller, and really playing in that, like, you know, the voice of the customer, like, you know, your kid's not going to ride this thing for the whole time. What do you do next? So like those kind of hot buttons matter, right? And then really kind of tying into, even though it's ultimately the kid that's riding the bike, we all had an emotional experience growing up. Most of us remember the first time we rode a bike. And for most people, that's the first time they felt freedom, independence, all those emotions that I described with my own experience. Yeah. So how do you tap into that? And another fear that came out in our conversations was that people have to parent using screens. They don't want to, but that's the world that we live in. It's kind of like, give a kid an iPad and that distracts him for a little bit. I'm busy. I got my own stuff going on. Maybe I'm looking at my own phone. And so how do we change that dynamic such that kids want to go outside and ride their bike versus being on a screen? And then that is a healthier experience for the kid, but it's also a good thing for the ego of the parent. They feel like they're raising their kids in a way that they were raised. And so again, this has nothing to do with bikes, right? This has to do with the human experience, the struggles that we have as human beings, the egos that we have, the fears that we have, the things that we want to do and be fulfilled as individuals and, or in this case, parents. And so yeah, very much I think it's important to psychologically understand who your customers are, why they make the decisions they make as human beings, and then how does that relate to their product purchasing decisions for what you're actually building.
Yeah, I love that. I love how much time you spent with those customers. You obviously intimately know who that end user is, right? You know their fears, you know their aspirations. So I love that you did that much research. And I think that's what's going to set you and your brand apart. So I hope our audience takes notes from that. So let's dive into number 2 here, which is product optimization. You talked a lot about that. And I'm kind of curious from your experience, maybe with your current brand that you have as well, like what are the tools that you're using to track keywords? Or how do you identify which are the 5 to 15 keywords that you really want to hone in on for PPC that, you know, give you the biggest return for your effort? So how do you know kind of where to focus in terms of keyword optimization and PPC optimization?
Yeah, so I think one of the strategies that we use, and luckily, you know, Amazon, hat tip to them. I know sometimes they can be our worst enemy and our best friend, but they've come up with a lot of really insightful data that has really made that easier and made it real for folks. But there's frankly not a ton of great software in terms of the incremental keyword tracking. I mean, there's some feature sets out there, but I have yet to find one that truly captures what we want to do. So we use a tool that I kind of basically gave a good buddy of mine, Brett Burkaw, who's amazing with Google Sheets, and he's kind of a tech nerd and does a lot of the heavy lifting on making things simple, but within Google Sheets. And so we use a tool that kind of co-built with him called Metrix. It's METRIX. It's fbaexcel.io, I think is the name of his site. But what we basically do is we've got a daily tracker with all the metrics that matter, from organic impressions to clicks to conversions. Same thing for pay-per-click. And then we typically take 20 of the keywords that we believe matter at any given time, and we basically track those on a daily basis. So we know how many impressions, how many sales, how much profit, what pay-per-click was, and then we know the rank tracking on a daily basis across those 20 keywords. And I think that you do have to look at things in aggregate over a period of time, and I think daily is the best way to do that. And so one distinct strategy is we track stuff every day. It's not a simple way to do it, but we've made it, I would call it semi-automated. I like Google Sheets too, because you can kind of chop some data up and do some more customizable things that software tends not to enable you to do. And then what we really do is like, you know, I don't look at it daily, even though we track it daily, but I'll typically go in, you know, I get daily and weekly reports on my business in my email too. And if I see something trending down, okay, it's 20% down, this week versus the previous week or this week, same period last year, what's going on there? Okay, well, impressions are down. Or sessions are down. Okay, well, why are sessions down? Or maybe sessions are the same or up, but conversions down. Why is that? And then that's when those additional layers of looking at that keyword-centric ranking data helps to kind of paint a picture to diagnose those things. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the keywords. Sometimes it's, you know, your competitor got a badge, or they priced differently, or you priced differently, or there was some seasonal spike that happened, etc. But what the keyword tracking in aggregate over time enables you to do is paint a picture of where you're gaining or losing ground. And what are the keywords that matter? Which ones do you want to defend? Which ones do you want to improve upon? Which ones are you actually comfortable letting go? And so we have basically monthly strategies on keywords. So as an example, one of the things I like to do is, which is a little bit counterintuitive for a lot of folks, but if we're actually doing well on a keyword, call it top 3 positions, I like to try backing off and just say, okay, we've achieved this. We've been running steady state 1, 2, or 3 spots for the last month, 2 months, whatever. And again, you can see that with daily tracking. What would happen if we didn't spend money on that keyword on pay-per-click? Let's just take a knee for 3 weeks and see what happens. Do I maintain that organic rank or do I lose it? Sometimes you'll lose it and you got to turn that back on and back to the drawing board. Sometimes though, you'll find, hey, I can actually either shut off or significantly reduce spend because I've got organic position, and I can use that money either to bank it in profits or I can use it to experiment with graduating other keywords. The other thing that we like to do is if a keyword is outside of those top 5 spots, especially if it was in top 5 previously, we'll do like, okay, for this month, we're going to turn on Google Ads. We're going to actually put our backs in, beef up the budget on a single keyword campaign for that word, and check back in a month and see what happens with that keyword over time. And can I get it bumped back into that top 5 spot? And then I would say that there's these other keywords that emerge that either are new and or new brands or just ones that didn't initially catch your purview maybe a year and a half ago when you started analyzing the product that you're not paying attention to at all. And uncovering those hidden gems, those new keywords that you hadn't thought of, and how do you graduate those into the mix and build those out. So for me, it starts with daily tracking. And then I think there's distinct strategies based on how you're ranked for those specific keywords that you can implement to either optimize your profits and or optimize your organic rank.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Tell me a little bit more if you are outside the top 5, right? Let's say you previously you started to slip. Tell me more about those strategies that you employ. You said you'll light up your PPC exact, match campaign, right? And then you're also turning on a Google Ads campaign. I would assume that with Google Ads, Amazon doesn't see what keywords are coming from Google, right? So it's just more of a generic Google, campaign, obviously with multiple keywords. Is that correct? Are there any other things that you're using to try to regain ranking when you've lost it?
Yeah, it's fairly simple. I mean, first of all, I guess even going back a step is how is that keyword optimized in your listing, and is it significant enough that you want to introduce that to a different layer of your listing, or maybe add it if it doesn't even exist? So maybe it's in a bullet. What happens if I bump it to the title? And again, this is where you've got to look at ones that maybe, hey, I'm just not ever going to convert on this word, and you drop those off the title. There's things like that happen, but one might be, hey, where is this keyword in my listing as it resides today? Can I bump it into what's potentially a more significantly algorithmically beneficial spot? So that's kind of step number 1. Step number 2, that's fairly simple, right? It's like, okay, this is, what we're spending on the keyword. And I love single keyword campaigns for the most part. I think one of the things with focusing on a more finite list of words, which I do believe is the new Amazon, that doesn't mean that we don't target a lot of other ones and have other strategies, but we're typically running 15 to 20 campaigns that matter. So you've got a single campaign, and that gives you a lot of incremental benefit that you can play with top of search percentage. You can play with your bids. You can play with your overall budget amount. I mean, it starts with budget, right? If I'm capping out the budget and the economics are clean, then just beef up the budget and spend more money. You're going to get more impressions, more sales. Or maybe it's a conversion issue. Well, why is it not converting well with that word? Can I do something with my image or my bullets that helps convert for that specific search term? And is it worth me editing my listing to do that? Maybe you play with price. There's other things that you do at the keyword level. So some of that analysis comes into play, but really it's just coming down to changing your bids, percentage of placement and or your overall budget. In terms of Google, there is, and actually I might misspeak here, but I believe that there are some threads that carry through from Google Ads. We've started to use a tool by Carbon 6 for this called Pixel.me that helps automate things, sets up attribution on the back end, etc. And what we will do is we'll actually set up single keyword campaigns on Google as well. And I believe that there is some data that carries through from Google Ads to Amazon on that. So I believe that there actually is some benefit from that standpoint. But that's it, man. It's fairly basic stuff. Again, it's not rocket science, but I think the biggest thing is most people aren't paying attention at that level. They're not paying attention to what's slipping, what's not. And they're not willing to A/B test. And hey, for this next, and we do this for all our products, right? Okay, so for this 30-day cycle, we're going to do this with these three keywords and this with these 3 keywords. Okay, here's where we are now. Here's where we've been, team. You guys go deploy it. I'm going to check back in a month. We're going to review the analysis and see what happened. I think that experimentation, that curiosity, that tweaking, and these are subtle tweaks. They don't take a lot of time, don't take a lot of thought, but constantly tweaking. That's where you make a 2% gain here, 3% gain there, etc. But if you're doing that every month for every single product, you carry that out over an annual period, and you've got orders of magnitude more optimization than most people have in their business.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it sounds like you definitely have a full team that's helping you execute on these strategies. Tell me more about, what your team looks like. Do you have kind of like maybe call it a brand manager or a product manager that is overseeing those daily metrics and coming up with those strategies then?
Yeah. And again, this kind of goes back to a philosophical question. And I think that a lot of people chase growth for growth's sake. And a lot of this is ego too. And I've felt that a lot in my life, right? Okay, well, shit, I've built a 7-figure business. Now I got to build an 8 one. Then people that do an 8-figure, well, how do I get to 50 million? Then it's like, you're kind of on this hedonic treadmill, and you got to step back and ask yourself why. And I've done a lot of soul searching on this, because why I got out of corporate was I had 7+ hours of meetings a day. I had to drive 45 minutes to work to and from. I had, at my peak, probably 40 employees and probably 7 direct reports that I had one-on-ones with every single week. And while that was certainly fulfilling in one respect, because you get to see other people flourish and get fulfillment in their careers, and there's a lot of joy that comes with that leadership, I wasn't happy doing that. And, I got into this because I wanted time freedom. I wanted to be able to ride my bike and ski and build businesses I thought were cool. But there is a point where you've got to ask yourself, how big do you want to get and why do you want to get that big? And so for me, once my personal needs were met, I'm like, I would much rather have a smaller, simpler structure that makes me happy and makes me doing things that the majority of the time I want to do. And for me, that complexity, that additional employee base I've seen in my life just derive less happiness as much as I've gotten fulfillment from the leadership side. So we've got a pretty simple team. I mean, I've got somebody that focuses more on the operations side, somebody that focuses more on the traffic side. I've got kind of a manager that helps oversee a lot of the day-to-day leadership and stuff, so I can kind of do more diving in and diving out. We've structured a lot of automations with the data reports and systems such that I can come in and see something in 5 minutes on a daily email, make decisions and off to the races, versus having to dig into each component myself. And then we've basically strategically used a lot of vendors that make sense. So all of our creative stuff, we outsource. There's a lot of other things that we outsource as well. So I would say on the 2 main pillars of the business that involve employees, one is going to be, I would call it traffic, which is people that are focused on, they're running that daily report on ranking. They're running analysis on where our competitors are with keywords. So they're really focused on what's happening with our sessions, conversions, traffic. They're running all of our pay-per-click campaigns. They're doing the external stuff, influencer strategy, all the reach out that we do across 4 or 5 different areas off of Amazon. And then I've got another pillar that's much more ops driven, which is starting with customer support, making sure that we've got mechanisms in that. Review management. We've got a lot of specific strategies on curtailing negative reviews and instigating new ones and metrics around that. The biggest one in operations, frankly, that a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to, but there's probably more money there than there is in pay-per-click, which is demand planning. So having really thoughtful demand planning processes. Where's my inventory? You want to have the right amount without burning cash flow, but not too much where you've got some issues going on. So really thoughtful about demand planning. Where's our product? When do I need to reorder? Where is it in warehouses? What's the most efficient way to get it into different warehouses? So that ops piece is kind of another pillar. And then we basically supplement creative and a lot of those other things using vendors. And then where I step into the business is much more in terms of, I'm kind of the canary in the coal mine. So I'm looking at that data that we've constructed that I see daily, weekly, monthly, and making decisions based on that. I'm making decisions based on the bookkeeping that gets done by a third party. And that's where I'm like, okay, hey, let's try this. Let's try this. I'm seeing this. Why is this happening? I'm asking the questions. I'm probing. I'm instigating the tests that we want to do. I'm instigating the projects, the activities. And then I'm also thinking more philosophically about product development and growth. And so that's a lot around what are the new products we're going to launch. A lot of our strategies the last couple of years has been international expansion and or expansion into other channels. So I play that role. Number one, I enjoy that stuff. That's where it doesn't feel like work to me. So I'm trying to orchestrate my workflow such that I enjoy 90% of what I do. And then keeping the business and the team structure in terms of both systems and number of employees such that I'm good with this. I'm making enough money. I'm able to travel in Europe for 5 weeks with looking at my computer once every couple of days. I just got back from a month in Vancouver. I'm doing what I want to do as a human being, and I'm getting fulfillment out of my business. And it's generating enough money that my team is fulfilled and happy and making their lives enriched. I'm building something that I'm proud of. I'm able to share with others and help impart that wisdom. Like, that to me is the sweet spot. And like, I feel like when you focus on that fulfillment focus, the money comes, the performance comes, and it will right size you for the things that you want in your life. And so, yeah, in a long-winded way, that's the team structure and kind of philosophy around how I build businesses now.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I love that you went back to like that philosophical question. It's like, well, what do you want, right? Do you want to try to build this next, corporate behemoth, right? That we're going to 100 million and more? Or is it like, look, I don't need A, that much money, and B, I really don't want to have to build out the team that would be required in order to get to, that level. And so I think everything that you just shared, I think there's a lot of golden nuggets in there. Adam, as we start to wrap things up, I want to touch on this last and final thing, traffic. You've been talking a lot about, some of the influencer partnerships, or kind of like creating a framework around how you can go and approach these influencers to, become brand ambassadors and things for you. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts in terms of like, what strategies are you implementing right now to reach out to influencers, to get them on your team, to become brand ambassadors and things like that. Tell me more about what you've been doing on the influencer space.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll maybe caveat this with, this is a playbook that I've yet to fully crack, especially on the more traditional influencer side of Instagram and TikTok. So that's the one that we're really trying to get more sophistication around with Rydio. But there's certainly some strategies there I can speak to, as well as some other ones that we've definitely dialed in over the years that are a little bit more off the beaten path. So I guess starting there, one of the things that I've liked to do is yes, Amazon is the largest product search engine in the world. Yes, that's where most people start and finish their product purchasing decisions. But a lot of people still go to YouTube, and a lot of people go to Google. And so if you go in and you type in your product category into Google, undoubtedly after you get through the typical ads that you would typically see on Amazon, Google's got those too, obviously. You're going to see top 10 balance bikes for kids. You're going to see all these articles from CNET to less known sites that have captured organic rank on Google for those search terms, where people are actively making a purchase decision based on research. So a couple of years ago, I'm like, well, how do we get into this? So one of the strategies that we deploy is, it depends on where the product is in its life cycle. If it's a new product, certainly the first 6 months, we reach out to 2 to 5 of those a day. So we'll reach out to these folks that have sites, be like, hey, notice you've got your top 5 balance bikes for kids. Just wanted to let you know we're this US based brand. We've got 1,000 reviews on Amazon. My product obviously doesn't yet, but if that's the case for yours, we've got 1,000 reviews on Amazon. It converts well. Here's where it is. It's one of the top performers. I noticed that you're linking off to these other products. What is it going to take for us to get in the mix? And those are pretty easy conversations, because you can help incent them with additional commissions that they don't see, because typically they're going to get paid about 2 to 3% from Amazon affiliate programs. So you can beef up those commissions. What I love about that strategy, unlike Instagram, all this, like, egos aren't there. Like, you're narcissistic Instagram influencers, like, well, pay me $10,000 and all the, and like they're much more demanding. These folks oftentimes don't even need the product, right? They're literally like, okay, yeah, this is a cool product. I'm going to make more money from it. I'm going to plug you into one of those slots. We'll see how it goes. So I think that active outreach for organic search results and lists is something that I don't hear a lot of people do or talk about. That's one of our things that we do. And literally it's just a numbers game, right? Yeah. Having a discrete task list for somebody in our team that on a daily basis is identifying and reaching out to those sites. The other one that I really, really like is YouTube. So again, a lot of people are going to start their decisions on YouTube. How to teach a kid to ride a balance bike, top bikes for kids, Strider bikes, whatever it is. You can kind of get the idea. And again, once you pull on those threads, you'll get 30 other ideas that you can use. So we'll basically reach out to those YouTubers, and one avenue is getting your existing video, getting their existing video plugged in with. So say they did a bike, a video that has 30,000 views and gets 800 views a week. How do we get our link in there, and what can we do to incent that creator? A more likely approach, though, is, hey, we loved your video on this. Would love to see how we can work together to get a new one created. So those are typically pay to play. So you're going to have to pay some amount of money there. You're going to have to send free products. So that's an element of it. But you get a couple things. You get this evergreen source that may live on YouTube for 6 years that's going to steadily give you clicks and views. Yeah. And those signals alone, even if somebody doesn't buy, are going to be beneficial for your listing. But ultimately, people are going to buy. And then you've also got content. So you can chop that up. You can use it in your ads on pay-per-click. You can use it in your listing. You can add those as videos and resources in Amazon posts. Like you have this kind of 360 tangible asset. So I think YouTube is probably my favorite just because of the evergreen component. You know, Instagram, TikTok, you basically are flash in the pan for 24 hours, likely less than that. And you've got a similar cost structure, whereas YouTube doesn't have that. So that's one strategy. And again, if you go to the about page on these channels and you go down to the bottom and go to view email address, you can basically see the email. That's how we reach out to them. They limit you to, I think, 5 a day. So similar strategy. Okay. For these products, for the next 3 months, person X on the team, I want you to spend 20 minutes finding, identifying, and emailing these folks. Here's the script, and then they run that program for you, right? So those are playbooks that we've instituted that are regular parts. Now the nuanced way is this new form, which is more Instagram, TikTok, which is more traditional influencers. And this is where I've been a little bit more thoughtful. Frankly, it's not something that I really care about or love to think about. Although it's a necessary evil, much like Amazon pay-per-click. I don't really care about it. I'm not curious about it, but it's something that you need to do. So one of we basically gave a small amount of equity in this new business to somebody who knows that world well. They have kids inflatable tent business that has, I think, something like 100,000 followers on Instagram. Their playbook exclusively to grow that business is to work with influencers. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to give up a piece of my business because I feel like there's going to be a substantial magnitude of value for them to test their playbook as well as their existing Rolodex on this business that's very relevant to what they do today. Plus, it's something I don't overall enjoy doing, so they're executing. So I think you might also look at, hey, who's somebody who knows influencer marketing? Is there an actual influencer themselves that I can be a bit more thoughtful and strategic about to bring them into the business? So that's one of the things that we've done and instituted. Now, the one that is to be determined is this playbook of regular outreach. What is the cost structure that makes sense? You know, free product, what's the size of influencers? So we're starting to see that play out. We're starting to play a lot with, and will with TikTok Spark ads. So if you find somebody that posts something on TikTok, you can actually get a little script of code and you can run your own ads on that actual video that has a link off to Amazon. So that's one of the strategies and approaches. And then I think the final one, again, kind of hat tip to my buddy Brett Burko, who's built out a lot of cool tools that we've integrated in our own business. He's got a site called, I think it's amzrolodex.io, I believe. But he's basically scraped and analyzed the 8,000 Amazon affiliate storefronts that exist. On Amazon. These are people that actively promote products on Amazon. Some of them do Amazon Lives, etc. He's got those spliced up by category. So we've also started to test that out, which is they're posting stuff on Amazon. That video shows up on your feed, your competitors' feeds, and you get clicks on it, and you have additional content that you can chop up. So we're starting to test that strategy out using kind of on-site Amazon storefronts and affiliates as well. So,
man, I love that. Adam, this has been a wealth of information that you've shared. You've dug into a lot of different rabbit holes today, and I appreciate you really getting into the nuts and bolts of everything. And that's kind of the purpose of the podcast, right? Is sharing the actionable strategies. And so as we kind of wrap things up here today, Adam, I love to leave the audience with 3 actionable takeaways from each episode. Here are the 3 takeaways that I noted, Adam. Let me know if you think I'm missing something. Number 1, it's going back to the list that you just shared, which is start first with product development. Your product research and development is your biggest lever that you can pull on Amazon. And so if you're the CEO of the business, if you're the founder, like that is where you should spend the majority of your time thinking of and coming up with ways to better serve the audience that you're targeting, right? And so whether that is an influencer, mommy blogger, right, type of avatar, or whether it's, an older person, whoever your avatar is, get to know them well. Adam talked about the surveys that he had done, and you heard how well he knew his end user. That is how well you need to know your end user in order to have success on Amazon and really just in general in the e-commerce space for years to come. So that's action item number 1. Action item number 2 is getting into the basics of Amazon of listing optimization. And there's a lot that goes into it, but how often are you A/B testing your main image, right? That is your greatest driver of click-through rate on Amazon. How often are you actually testing your price, moving the price up to see if it can grow your profit, moving the price down to see if you can grow profit by increasing the number of orders that you're getting? And then in addition, like, what do your images look like? And what are your PPC strategies? And really, your PPC strategies need to layer in with all the optimization strategies that you are doing. And Adam talked about doing like one optimization per month. It's like you work on one thing 1 month, see what happens with that lever that you just pulled, and then start creating that, I guess, your own Rolodex or library of tests that you've implemented. And you're going to look back a year from now and be able to say, oh, I'm finding a pattern when I change the title or when I change the main image, these things typically shoot my listing back up to the top. So that's action item number 2. Actually implement those optimization tactics that you've heard a number of times. Final action item number 3 is driving external traffic. And this is, I think, what is going to set apart the e-commerce, success stories 5 years from now. I think that Amazon is going to, we've already seen that on page number 1, 50 to 60% of the ad spots on page 1 are all ads, right? And so you've only got maybe 40% of the page for organic listings. So who's going to win on Amazon and e-commerce in general in the long term? It's those people that know how to build an audience and create a raving fan base, and that can then direct that traffic to your listings, whether you're trying to offer it on Shopify or Walmart or Amazon. If you can gather the eyeballs and then direct that traffic, that is what's going to set you apart in the future. Adam, is there anything else that you think I missed that we should give as a takeaway from this podcast?
No, man, I think you honed it in well. I do a lot of talking and not a lot of thinking, so I'm glad that you were taking notes and remembering all this stuff we talked about. But yeah, it was a fun combo, man. Great job leading it.
Awesome. Well, I've got a page full of notes. That's for darn sure. Now, Adam, I like to ask each guest the 3 following questions to wrap things up here. So question number 1, and I didn't prepare you with these, so here we go off the cuff. What's been the most influential book that you've read and why?
That's interesting. And maybe this is a bit of recency bias because it's one that had a really big impact on me this year. It's a book by Michael Singer called The Untethered Soul. Again, as I've gotten a lot more into philosophically better understanding my life, and business is really a spiritual vehicle. It's a self-discovery vehicle as much as it is a business thing. And I've come to learn and understand that. And how do I approach my life across all facets, including business that matter? And so Untethered Soul is just really good. It basically helps you realize that you're probably not the person you think you are. So, my name's Adam. I grew up in Canada, moved to Texas, was in corporate, did acquisitions. That led me to physical products. Now I do YouTube. I mountain bike, all those. Those are things I do. They're not who I am as a human being. Also, the thoughts that you have on a daily basis. We've all got this voice in our head, oftentimes replaying a similar script over and over and over. Oftentimes it's not a kind voice. That's not who you are either. So like more deeply peeling those layers back to understand who you really are, what you care about, what matters to you. So Untethered Soul has been one of the most profound impacts in terms of a book and helping me understand who I am and what I care about.
I love that. Getting down to the root of like, do you know who you truly are deep down inside? I think that's an important thing that everybody needs to do some soul searching on. Question number 2 for you, Adam. What has been your favorite, maybe new productivity tool or software tool that you've been using or maybe recently discovered that you think is going to be a game changer?
Yeah, I've played a lot with this in terms of trying to optimize my life and frankly build some discipline into my life. I think that's one of the things that can kind of, when you're your own boss, you call your own shots. You can also get lazy and undisciplined. And I've certainly had to kind of, rein that in over the years. But the biggest thing that seems to work really well, and it's not software and it's not any kind of tech-based thing, but it's just a new philosophy that I hold myself to, which is the 3 things. So I've made a deal with myself, and you've got to make this deal with yourself because you're the one that's ultimately going to hold you accountable, not some software reminder, which is I need to do 3 things in my businesses every single day that are high leverage and that matter. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to check an email. I'm not going to sign an invoice, like all the other stuff that you got to kind of keep the ship running. Those things need to happen too. But if I do 3 things that matter right now in my business that are high leverage and that one thing is going to have a cascade of benefits either for my team and or for my business for weeks, months, years to come. If I do 3 of those in a year, that's, north of 1,000 things. that moves mountains. So for me, it's like every day I made a commitment to myself that I don't have a time around it. I don't have a thing on my Google Calendar. I don't have a timer that reminds me. I don't have an app checklist. It's just like the morning I sit down and I think about what are the 3 things that would really matter today. And I make sure that I do those by the time I go to sleep. And then I do that the next day. And I do that the next day. It's tangible. It's not overwhelming because most people can do 3 things. And it's simple too. And it doesn't have the same constraints of like, oh, I got to do this by 9 a.m. and I'm doing this by 10 a.m. So yeah, the 3 things, that's been the biggest benefit productivity wise for me.
Yeah, I think it's simple yet so powerful. I think so many people can get caught up in just like, well, I cleared out my email inbox today, right? And it's like, well, did you actually move the needle? Yeah. I'm curious, Adam, like just off the top of your head, do you have any ideas as to like, typically what do you find those top 3, value lever like tasks being in your business? Is it making phone calls or is it like creating partnerships? What do you typically end up seeing those 3 become each day?
Yeah, well, I think like first of all, I've tried to shed the things I don't enjoy doing, even though those may be important. I think that, again, I think doing stuff that for the most part you care about and that feel good and that you're excited to do, it's a lot easier to do those things. And if you match that with them being highly productive and those being high leverage, that matters. So I've had to construct that as a starting point. I think that one of the things that I'll do is I'll look at I'll analyze the business on where it's at, whether it's that day, that week, that month. And I'll just think about, hey, what do we want to test and do this month, and kind of combing through the data, having that intellectual curiosity to follow those threads and be like, okay, I think that this might be something that's interesting, and I'll develop a concept around that and then maybe pass on to the team or execute it myself. So I think that's one starting point. I think the other one is around the sessions and conversion of the business. If you can impact a conversion rate, let's say your conversion rate is 18% and you get it to 20%. So it's a 2% uplift. Yeah. If you run that math out over the number of sessions that you get over a year, that 2% lift could be worth $90,000, which if you sell your business times 4x, you do the math on that pretty quick. It's a pretty substantial thing. So a lot of my thought now is around conversion rate and how do I really optimize for that and make sure that the listings are optimized. So that's probably another area that tends to gravitate towards the top. And then the other thing is frankly non-Amazon specific. It's what I'm doing with YouTube. It's what I'm doing with the course business, affiliate stuff. There's other business projects outside of the Amazon sphere that I'm involved in and really care about and get fulfillment out of. So I just think about, hey, what do I want to, where's my intellectual curiosity taking me? What's a task that could really amplify that? And so I'll usually have like a non-Amazon component. That's one of the top 3.
Love that. Thanks for letting me probe down a little bit, learn a little bit more about the way you think.
Cool.
All right, Adam, last question here. Who is somebody that you admire or respect the most in the e-commerce space that you would recommend other sellers should be following and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. And frankly, I've tried to manage my attention a lot more effectively. So I've done a little bit less of that than I would have maybe 2 years ago, but I've actually got a ton of value from LinkedIn, honestly. Like I've kind of lessened my focus on YouTube in terms of Amazon eComm specific stuff. Just because there is quite a bit of noise there. But there tends to be some pretty profound, especially technical elements that are deployed on LinkedIn. A guy I love just because he's just crazy smart and really thoughtful is John Durkitz. Worked at Amazon, worked at an aggregator, now builds in his own business. Is just really, really thoughtful, intellectual, insightful stuff. I would say I'll throw a couple more in just because I know you asked for one, but a couple that have impacted me is Joe Shellerud from Ad Advance. Just the amount of data info he shares on pay-per-click strategies is just awesome. So follow him. And then Mansoor Nazari is another guy that really keeps a pulse on all the Amazon tools. The search query reports. How do you use it? How do you leverage those things that Amazon's coming out with? Seen a ton of nuggets from him. So I throw those 3 on the mix and don't sleep on LinkedIn because there's a lot of value being dropped there.
That's awesome. Adam, thank you so much for your time today. Before we depart, where can people follow you and learn more about you?
Yeah. Again, my pseudonym on YouTube, I deployed my YouTube channel when I was still in corporate. So I was like, I don't want to use my real name necessarily, but you can search Adam Heist on YouTube. You'll find me there. Usually drop a video a week, ranging from interviews like this to deep dive masterclasses, strategic stuff to just thoughts of the day. And then if you want to connect with me personally, send me a message, etc. Just Adam Runquist on LinkedIn. You'll find me there.
Awesome. Adam, thanks so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Dude, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Visit ecombreakthrough.com for more information. If you've enjoyed today's episode, the best way you can show your appreciation is by clicking the subscribe button and quickly leaving a review. See you again next time.